the stuff that we're telling you to do. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so we move on to the next one. Everyone's given a bit of advice on that.
As we explore the government one, the one to throw at them would be to cover the insurance. If the government cover the insurance, because they're always the big protector of the whole country, that means that they can say, this place is protected forever by us. We pay the insurance bill. And I think that would be a really decent proposal to take to the government. And that wipes out a big chunk of what they need. So if we can explore that, would be...
Because it protects it for the future.
And and that's their bit.
Won't do it. Okay.
Thank you, Your
Far
Worship.
away, please.
Yes, so the Santa Parade, again, no specific line item funding application, funding available from the Strengthening Communities and the Events and Festival Fund. So the feedback was that the Santa Parade requested permanent funding of $125,000 per annum towards organisational expenditure to support the event. And it equals 50% of their net costs. No other feedback was received. The Deputy Mayoral recommendation, an additional $50,000 per annum to the Events and Festivals Fund passed on to the Santa Parade, and the cost on that is 0.0072%. Staff advice, $35,000 from the Strengthening Communities Fund, and $40,000 from the Events and Festival Fund for 3 years, and review the event in the financial year 2027, and there's no impact on rates under the staff advice proposal.
Melanie, Sarah and Tyler.
So that staff advice, is that the same as what's in the draft, or is it additional?
John?
The amount is the same. The staff advice is to ring fence that for 3 years to give the event the certainty to go out and find additional sponsorship. They were asking for two things, finance and certainty. We've recommended the same finance level, but giving the certainty for 3 years.
So is that, sorry, that's what we've funded them last year?
Yes, it is.
Right. That is just that they were asking for additional, weren't they? So with the Mayor's recommendation then, is that is that at 50 additional to the 75?
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It's a little bit confusing. Yep. Yes. Sarah?
Process-wise, I'm really reluctant to predetermine contested funds ahead of time. So we know that these funds are enormously oversubscribed anyway, and that there's increasing pressure on them and that they're not increasing. So it doesn't give us the ability to weigh up these against other community groups who'll be coming to us at that time. I would prefer that we did something that was, specific for the Santa Parade if we were going to do the Santa Parade, rather than taking it from community groups ahead of time before we've weighed up the relative merits of them. That would be my personal opinion there. What's that? Yeah, it is, but it's the staff advice. So I'm okay with the whole putting more funding in to then be tagged. But the current fund, so ring fencing $35,000 for the next 3 years from Strengthening Communities, when we know that those various community groups are going to be coming to us and we're already oversubscribed, means we don't get a chance to weigh up other community groups through this. It takes funds out when we know there's other community groups who are dealing with people. Yeah.
And incentivises people to apply for contestable funds via the LTP.
Right, via the LTP and predetermine things over time. So if we were going to provide certainty for the Santa Parade for 3 years, I would rather, if you look at the 0.0072%, if we did 1.5 times, if we made it the 125 or 100K, we're still only looking at 0.0 1.15 or something like that, rather than taking it from strengthening communities. So that would be my preference, and it might be that we do that and we allocate it to the events fund, in that way, doing it. But I don't want to ring fence strengthening communities.
Right. You make it 100 grand more.
But, you know, make that all part of the mayor and deputy mayor recommendation, 100, you know, extra 125k, the events and festivals fund passed on to the Centre Parade, rather than bring fencing from the other two.
So in other
funds.
words, add on to rates.
The events and festivals contestable as well, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but but you're not taking money away from an existing pot. That you're adding to the pot,
Right.
rather than we're just not getting to weigh up.
Splitting hairs. Tyler.
I'm actually really open to Sarah's recommendation, and the question I have is, why isn't it specifically line item funded?
I can answer half of that question. There are two components to this funding. The strengthening communities, which supports the organisation as a whole, running themselves, and the events and festivals fund, which is the actual event component. So it's two different funds, and that's where the funding is available. It's not line item funded at the moment because staff get the applications and look at them and make a recommendation, and it does change from time to time, particularly in this case as the nature of the event has changed. Nigel, you might want to add something.
So, John, the main thing is that these guys have got to have certainty for 3 years at least, because then they can get other funders on board. Is it?
Yeah.
That we have to do that. Otherwise,
We can also answer that some few years ago, council moved away from line item funding a whole lot of community groups and moved it all into the strengthening communities. It was at the review of the strengthening communities fund and said it was better to actually be able to evaluate groups against each other and look at the priorities at the time and fund through a contestable fund, rather than some groups getting locked into historical funding and being locked while the others weren't. So that's why we don't tend to have a line item, because of a previous council decision. If you want to move back to a whole of line items, that's your discretion.
So I was only thinking, reason being is Centre Parade's sort of an anchor event in comparison to, you know, a regular event.
that's right. It's more of an iconic thing that we for all of the city, rather than flopping in and out of other things.
Which would, in my opinion, mandate something sort of like that. Because how oversubscribed is the Strengthening Communities Fund at the moment, John?
Heavily. I'll get back to you with the figures.
Okay.
Yeah, it's more than double I think maybe triple the applications for the funds available. I'll get back to you with the figures.
Okay, and if it was a line item, is there agility within the annual plans? If, say, for example, in some random world that the Centre Parade played up and didn't hit their marks, that we can withdraw that budget from that FY 25-26?
Yeah.
Okay, so in light of that, I'd like to just recommend or flag that I'd be keen to see what it looks like as a line item in terms of,
So put
How
the
we do it?
whole 125 grand on rates, is what you're saying.
well, yeah, because the
Okay.
Strengthening Communities Fund's oversubscribed.
Melanie? No, we're just scratching your ear. Okay. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Look, so Centre Parade came to strengthening communities and events and festivals in previous alliterations. Is that correct? Iterations. Is that correct? Yes. So that's not taking money out of that they haven't taken before. So that's kind of that's
Red herring.
So I do like the line item option as well, but where the strengthening communities is well and truly over subscribed to, what I'd like to know is what of those organisations that are coming to us used to go to RATA, because RATA changed their format without, and we talk about relationships, that there was no discussion, as I know, with us. So what would be good is to know how many of those organisations are now coming to us, what percentage of what they're asking for, or if it's new, was covered by other funding agents that are no longer funding them, because it does seem to me that we are the last cab on the block, and because we're the last cab on the block, our staff and us are getting a bit of a kicking because the public see there's a shortfall. And in actual fact, others have changed without, it's kind of like just passing the parcel and then buggering off. And I think we need to understand that as councillors as well. But I would support this as a line item. But the other question I've got is, would this, because there are two parts to this, because in the building that they've been given, which is a great thing, but it does need maintenance and upkeep, etc. I don't think they really realise that. But it is housing a lot of community groups and seemingly more that we were supporting for rents in other places. So it's actually in that situation. Does that stop them applying for funding for the building? Yeah, well, but I mean, this is the reality that we're facing. So the parade and the execution, the management of the parade seems to be under really good management and processing going forward. So that's one funding. The building and the community groups that are in there, the guys that, the people that make toys for Christmas and the slot cars and all that kind of thing, that's a really important thing as well. So that's that
my
wouldn't discount
understanding
funding.
from what John said is the 35 is for the operation and running of the organisation.
For those kind of
and
things.
the 40 is
Okay.
for the event.
Okay.
So if you pulled both those sets of money out of there and made it a line item
Yep.
of 1.25k,
Yep.
they could potentially come back for additional funding through strengthening communities.
Well,
It just makes more work for you. Okay, hang on. Righto, so are you done, Tim?
Just because part of it is also trying to streamline our staff's time, because there's a huge amount of cost there.
Yes.
So if it were a line item and done and dusted, then our staff could concentrate on those community organisations and groups that are now struggling because they're only getting funding from us and no other organisation. So I would like that rata question at some stage, because it is a
You have to be
complicated
clear,
one.
you are setting a precedent now of moving back to line item funding, because everybody
Okay.
in communities is coming in year on, well, most of them are coming in year on year themselves.
The key is that they need certainty for funding, because that helps them getting sponsorship. If an organisation doesn't have certainty of funding, it is harder to get sponsorship. And at the moment, it is really hard to get sponsorship out there.
Can I make a suggestion?
Oh, sorry,
Hang on,
I've
we've got a
list.
queue. Victoria?
Thank you, Mary, for helping us understand the history to the funding models, but it does appear to me that we are reinventing a wheel, and I think it would be very helpful if the previous advice that was prepared in relation to this can be made available to us, perhaps in the first instance, in order that we can be properly informed about what the options are, because otherwise we're just reinventing a wheel. So I'd like to see that information, please.
It was pre-trim, wasn't it? We'll see if we can find it. It was pre-trim, so it might be at it.
Because otherwise we're setting a very
But we'll
dangerous
see if we
precedent
can
with
find it.
floodgates.
Yep.
Yep.
Aaron?
Yeah, I like where you got to with the mayor and deputy mayor's recs. I think that was good, but I'm happy that we still pull it out of those other funds that already exist, rather than just take the whole lot as an add-on to rates, if that was what's being suggested around the table, because that's putting rates up. Our job is to, if we want to fund one thing more, we've got to work out what else we fund less. It's not just to keep add. We got way too much feedback during the LTP from people that are hurting. They don't want add-ons. They want us to reshuffle the deck chairs, and those recommendations did do that and do it well. And the other thing around the Santa Parade is that it's now becoming an attraction to the city. It's becoming an event that people from outside of Christchurch will be travelling to. It's pretty clear that the new version is a bigger attraction than it ever was going to be going down Colombo Street, and so that should be celebrated, encouraged, and it will have a benefit to our city beyond just being a great event.
Absolutely. Pauline?
Look, I think that it's really obvious that we need to retain the 35k going through strengthening communities in the contestable process, and that will be addressed, I think it's around August, is it? Applications, and at that point it could be assessed as a multi-year option if we agree to it. And I think if you look at it like the 40k from events and festivals and the
plus
the additional 50 is actually topping up the events and festivals to cover that. So if you think of it like that, but it's a small rate impact to top it up. So I think the recommendation is a really workable one, and we should really consider that, because it has a lesser rate impact, but it will give them the funding, because
They need certainty.
I think they will be successful through the strengthening communities, and at that point they can address the multi-year funding there. We can't do it here.
Thank you, Pauline.
You're welcome.
Andre, then Sarah.
Thank you. Yeah, they do need certainty. I mean, there's a number of others that do as well. To me, it seems like the obvious sort of answer here would have been establishing that city identity fund with those key events that are citywide that need certainty for multi-year funds, and that would include, Santa Parade, Christmas in the Park, Christchurch Marathon, Coast to Coast. So not establishing city identity fund means we're going to be doing this, having these sorts of conversations, every year. I think the current model is not sustainable. This doesn't appear to me to be sustainable. The additional 50k to the events festival funds, that's a fund that's oversubscribed by 500-600% and has been frozen for a number of years. So you factor in inflation, even an extra 50k on now, it's still an effective cut from years gone by. To me, you need a fund for those key events citywide that where that events qualify for. Otherwise, it just seems to me we're going to keep going round and round in circles and not being able to provide events like this the certainty that they need. But you're right, this does need certainty for 3 years. But there's a few others, like the Christchurch Holy Festival of Colours, for example. That event's massive now, but they having to apply every year. That seems to me like something that needs certainty. Christmas in the Park, Marathon, Coast to Coast. I mean, they would need certainty as well, I would have thought. So, certainly agree with the sentiment.
Thank you, mate. Sarah?
I can understand the desire not to add anything additional above this onto rates, but I'm still really wary about predetermining strengthening communities and events and festivals funding. However, if we look back to the previous discussion on the Arts Centre, if we're looking at a mix between Capital Endowment Fund and rates for the Arts Centre, it does free up a little bit of space in the Capital Endowment Fund over the next 3 years that potentially the Santa Parade could come out of, which would be not rates. Would give them the certainty they need without us predetermining other contestable funds. And so that might be something that we could think about and maybe get advice on instead.
Okay. Right, we've got two more, and I'd like to get it's good discussion. Yanni, please, and then Kelly.
Just wondering if we could talk to our council companies about sponsoring this, like maybe sponsoring a float each or something, so that they could kind of help contribute to it.
They do get sponsorship from outside companies, not necessarily council companies, but they do get good sponsorship from outside companies. And this is just to keep them going. This is not what they need to run the thing for the whole year.
No, I know that, but if you think about like kind of the idea of what they could showcase in terms of technology, in terms of innovation, it seems a really obvious kind of thing to put a bit more focus on in terms of investment, and I appreciate that the LTP probably is not the best time to kind of do that, but in terms of the direction they're going, it is good. They're clearly going in the right direction. So I was just wondering if we could look at what else we could do to get our council companies, maybe talk to CCHL.
So just to clarify, we communicated to CCHL that we did want our companies to prioritise dividends over giving out a lot of discretionary funding.
But they do.
It's not
like,
our place to suggest who
they do sponsor a lot of other stuff, and probably they would get a tax benefit from sponsoring as well.
Phil, I'm just conscious we're doing a $18 billion plan and we're talking about $100,000.
Yeah,
and the only other question I had is
if you look at it from that point of view, it's 0.018%.
Yeah, I'm just in time for value. It's
probably just cost that much already.
So I was quite keen to know, like, if we could give a one-off capital grant to get that building fit for purpose. That was the kind of only other thing that I took.
They haven't asked for that.
Yep. Kelly, please.
A really interesting discussion. I tend to agree with Andre. There's a lot of organisations that, that have kind of make a big contribution to the city that I think it would be good to put them in as a line item. But they have to deserve that sort of status by being fiscally responsible and lasting for a few years. So, and I tend to agree with Sarah too. Just in terms of I'm not sure that that's the way we should be using the Strengthening Communities Fund. Yeah.
Just for staff, we're not
We've
precluding
got a
capital
general,
endowment funds.
we've got
either.
a general feel.
Yep,
Yep.
okay.
I think, you're right.
Yep, I think so.
Spin.
Got some
Right.
ideas.
So there's three things coming: Environmental Partnerships Fund, Biodiversity Fund, and Events Ecosystem. I want to get to them before we have a break of probably just morning tea's worth. And at the rate we're going on the Santa Parade, it could be about 8:30.